各位观众，新年好！从今天开始呢，我就准备开一个新的系列，叫做泰德篇。泰德是我的老公，他是一位加拿大人。那么在2007年，我和泰德呢，他那年退休了刚刚退休，我们俩呢就从多伦多搬到了北京，在北京居住了5-6年的时间对于泰德来说，这简直是他人生旅程的一个新的高光时刻。那么我们后面呢就陆续的来讲在北京他的故事，也包括我们俩一块经历的故事。今天呢，我来朗读泰德在2015年在情系北京渥太华北京协会的征文中呢，他写了一篇文章，这是一篇英文的，题目就叫 Beijing at Home。 Ted Kennedy. My wife Xiaodong has asked me to tell the story of how we came to live in Beijing for a very happy 6 years. As you will soon see, my story is a little bit different. I met and married Xiaodong after her immigration to Canada, and we lived in Toronto prior to my retirement from my position as a Canadian government official. We were very happy together, and Xiaodong adapted well to her new life in Canada. During my working career, I had opportunity to travel often and had been to many different countries. This included several visits to China, starting in the 1990s, when I began to develop my fascination with Chinese culture. My early visits to Beijing was similar to that of most tourists, as I stayed in hotels, did my sightseeing, and returned home after a few weeks. It was like putting your finger into a bomb tub to see how hot the water was before immersing yourself totally. As my retirement approached, Xiaodong and I talked about what we were going to do after I left work. We both agreed that we should take advantage of the time before we got too old to travel and enjoy life. One of the possibilities was an extended stay in China to give her the chance to see her family and me to experience a different way of living. In preparation for a move and as a test to see how I would cope with daily life in Beijing as a resident and not as a tourist, we took a longer trip to Beijing and stayed in her sister's apartment in a residential neighborhood. This test went well, and I began to see the attractions of living in Beijing, so we decided to go. We arrived in early 2007 and agreed to stay till at least after the Olympic. We did not realize then that we would stay much longer and still maintain strong connections with Beijing and China. I sometimes do things differently, and this decision is a good example. In most situations where a Westerner man marries a Chinese woman, he took his new bride to his homeland. Instead, my Chinese wife took her Canadian husband to live in her home city of Beijing. I was so happy that she did. After a few months of adapting to the differences, mainly lots of people and different food, I began to fit into Beijing more and more. Xiaodong's family and friends were very welcoming, and I was able to make many new friends. we lived in Chinese-style apartment located in a hutong, 外交部街, that was a few minutes walk from Wangfujing and Tiananmen Square. So could not have been more central or convenient. I loved exploring the various streets, venturing further away from home the more confident I became. It felt that our neighbors adopted me as their Lao Wai and were very friendly and curious in helping me fit in. My main problem in Beijing came from the fact that I couldn't read or write Chinese and can speak only a few phrases and those badly pronunciated. I tried but was unsuccessful in my efforts to learn Chinese. However, as you know, many people speak English in Beijing and many took the opportunity to speak English with me. This often worked to my advantage as shop assistants, waiters, etc. would come running over to help me, so they could practice some English. My attempts to try Chinese were always greatly appreciated, and people never laughed at my pronunciation. So in many ways, it was a great icebreaker. Not speaking Chinese also made me more interested in finding all that I could about sites and events in Beijing, so that by itself it became a major daily activities. I also have the opportunity to travel widely in China and was able to go to many places. At last count, I was up to 20 of China's 33 administrative areas. I hope to return to visit areas I have missed. After a few years, I felt that I really knew Beijing, and while no Lao Beijinger, I was certainly more than a tourist. Beijing is now home. The welcome given to me by family, friends, and average Beijingers made it feel that I belonged. When I have an opportunity to return Beijing, I have the feeling that I'm not going away, but coming home. Ted Kennedy, 2015 Spring Festival.